This was supposed to be a bit, but then I just started playing. Oops. There was a brief period in the late aughts, during the heyday of the Nintendo DS, where I got really into visual novel adjacent adventure and puzzle games. Your Ace's Attorney, Professor Layton, and then favorite of mine, Hotel Dusk, Room 215. These simplistic but distinctive visuals allowed for small teams to make big stories full of interesting characters, and they were really just perfect for that portable system. Since its replacement, a couple of visual novels have appeared in the collective consciousness, like Hatoful Boyfriend and Doki Doki Literature Club, but I just never went for them. My time with the genre, it seemed, had passed. Until last week, when I was catching up on video game book club podcast The Besties, and Justin McElroy made a recommendation that he pitched as Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, but with Picross. And suddenly I was hit with a wave of nostalgia, not just for Ace Attorney, but Picross too. I mean, I like Ace Attorney a lot, but I fucking love Picross. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me semi-logical. And today, I am talking about Mediatonic's Murder by Numbers. Murder by Numbers is a detective thriller of sorts, where clues are unlocked by playing nonograms, or Picrosses. Wikipedia lists literally 29 different names they go by, so call them what you want. But they are picture logic puzzles in which cells in a grid must be colored or left blank according to numbers at the side of the grid to reveal a hidden picture. In this game, you'll be given a rectangle, somewhere between 5x5 and 15x20. Each row and column has one or a series of numbers beside it. These correspond to the number of consecutive cells that must be filled in. 3 and then 1 means that 3 consecutive cells must be filled, then 1 or more must not be, and then another one must be. In a 5x5 grid, 3 and 1 tells you exactly how to fill the line. In a 15x20, it tells you absolutely nothing. You take on the role of Honor Mizrahi, an actor who is told on the final day of shooting a season for her murder mystery TV show that she has been unceremoniously fired. Shortly thereafter, the man who fired her is murdered in his office, and she takes it upon herself to solve the murder. While her and her newfound floating robot friend, Scout. The game actually begins with Scout waking up in a junkyard with a robot form of amnesia, and while roaming about trying to figure things out, Scout happens upon Honor in the studio parking lot as she is looking for her car keys and offers to help, because that's what he thinks he's good at. And so he investigates, which is to say, does a Picross, and finds what he believes is a key, but is, in fact, a tampon. So yeah, the first puzzle in this game has you finding a tampon. Calibrate your expectations accordingly. This is the structure for the whole experience. Go to a new location, investigate it, and solve any puzzles hidden in the backgrounds. Talk to persons of interest in that location, which may result in more puzzles, until everything has been investigated or asked. At that point, you will be able to go to a new location and rinse, repeat. Those characters that you talked to throughout definitely gave me some Phoenix Wright vibes with their big personalities and over-the-top visual styles. Some are specific to the situation or location, while others will make appearances throughout the game's 4 cases. There's Detective Cross, the gruff old man who slowly warms to Honor's meddling, KC, the flamboyant British makeup artist and Honor's closest friend, drag queens, egotistical talk show hosts, even a Japanese film director whose ultra-violent art house aesthetic has somehow made her the most sought-after talent in 1990s Hollywood. Easily the least realistic thing about this game. These characters are all silly and exaggerated, but there are 2 that I want to point out who aren't, and whose presence in the game I find genuinely strange. Honor's ex-husband Ryan and her mother Sharon. Ryan is abusive in an Adrian Griffin Invisible Man kind of way, using his enormous wealth and the connections it affords him to control her. For example, blackmailing the showrunner of her television show that he blames for her leaving him so that she will get fired, at which point he can swoop in, offer her a job and financial stability, and everything can go back to the way it was. and Sharon exists primarily to make Honor feel bad about herself so that she will go back to Ryan because Sharon always liked Ryan and believes that Honor will never do better and literally couldn't care less about her daughter as a person. This whole dynamic is really uncomfortable to watch play out and quite unlike everything else in the game. It is hard to square that with the overall tone. I mean, every time Ryan shows back up to remind you of how actually horrible he is in a very real and not at all fun way, there's a floating CRT monitor there to make some sort of comment. And while the jokes in this subplot are kept to a minimum and the game treats it comparatively seriously, it's not explored with any kind of depth. Ryan's presence and abuse are ultimately just other obstacles for Honor to overcome, and I cannot fathom why. It's not like the game doesn't take on other complex issues. Case 3 involves a gay bar that gets run into by a parade float, and one of the side characters in it is a bio queen, a woman who performs in female drag. This is interesting, and the revelation that she is indeed a biological woman prompts Scout to wonder about gender, because everyone's been assuming that Scout is a he, but why? And I dig the fact that they put a legitimate conversation about gender identity in here. But it's critical that they did so in a way that was tonally consistent with the game as a whole. The story is almost entirely dialogue-driven, but because it features no voice acting, rather using what Polygon's Jenna Stober calls beep speech, the emotions of each scene are conveyed by the accompanying images. And this is a place where Murder by Numbers falters a bit, because there just aren't enough of them. Hato Mao, who was behind Hatoful Boyfriend, designed the characters, and each of the handful of drawings that are used to represent the characters are vivid and clearly emotive, but their small number means that they're inevitably used in less appropriate situations. Sharon finds a dead body, but the face that she's given for that is the same one she makes when she's just generally concerned about something, and that actively distracts from the story. Sometimes they're more blatant than that. Detective Cross goes undercover at a boat party, except because there's no alternate costume, he still has his police badge on and is immediately recognized for what he is. And sure, call out your creative mistakes, I guess, but after Honor lies once and says, oh, he's an actor and just forgot because he's trying out for a part, that's the point where Cross needs to take off the gosh damn badge, and it's unacceptable that he doesn't. Later on, you question the man who called Cross out, and you're at the precinct, but the background you see is not the setting you're told you're in, because there's only one background at the precinct, the lobby, and you see the suspect standing in it, which was confusing because I had thought he'd been processed already. And it turns out I was right. Maybe you've forgotten, but I'm locked in a cell, he said. But there's no cell. I understand that Murder by Numbers was made by a small team and that it's a budget title and whatever, but moments like these just feel lazy. Sure, an entirely new background for a single conversation might not be justifiable, but no one forced them to have a character call out another location in the first place. And I refuse to believe that removing Detective Cross's badge and filling in the jacket for a couple of photos would have been prohibitively expensive or time-consuming. But there's something even more fundamental than that. Using this story as a wrapper for an increasingly difficult puzzle game means that the pacing of each case, especially in their back halves, is really weird. Because just as things are ramping up narratively and you begin making the story connections that it will take a little while for the characters on screen to see, you get hit with the hardest puzzle, meaning you spend the most amount of time outside of the story itself. And once you get to the third and especially fourth cases, these puzzles can take a while, easily more than 10 minutes and sometimes a whole lot more than that. There are hints that the game will give you to speed things up if you want them, but I refused until literally the second to last puzzle, at which point I allowed it to tell me which rows and columns had viable moves available after I had already failed 3 separate times to do it on my own, which was also irritating because there is no way to just reset a puzzle, meaning I had to go row by row and empty them out manually each time I fucked up, which happened like a dozen times over the course of the game. And the shift from puzzle brain mode to story brain mode isn't a smooth one. So I would frequently do the extra puzzles that are available and hold off on progressing the story because I just wanted to do more Picross and wasn't really ready for hijinks and drama. Especially because Picross itself is so disconnected from the events of the game. Investigation as part of a detective story makes sense. But usually the puzzles you do in games like these are the types of things you'd see on a TV show, if not an actual investigative work. But no one in CSI ever stopped what they were doing to solve a nonogram. But despite this fundamental tension, Murder by Numbers still basically works as both an interesting story and also a puzzle game. Is it a problem that they need to be thought of separately rather than as a cohesive experience? Yeah, probably. But when I got to the post-credits teaser for a potential sequel, I was immediately on board to see more of the adventures of Honor and Scout, and play more Picross while I did it. 7.4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hammer and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, @BlasianFMA, Magnolia Denton, and Elliot Fowler. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.